Say it.
Sing it!
Oh god, my beer is spilling over.
Oh, oops.
Hello, welcome to the episode. That's a good start.
Yeah, it sure was. Welcome to GamePunx. This is the GamePunx Bonus Round. My name is Ryan.
And I'm Ben.
And before we get started today, Ben had a funny story to tell me, apparently. Something that happened in the news.
Breaking scientific news. But before that, this bonus round episode will, of course, be about, as you can see in the YouTube title,
Comic book
games or manga games.
Yeah, games based on comics or somehow drawing inspiration from the world of comic books.
Mm-hmm.
All of this stuff is really, it's great idea fodder for games. I mean, it's the majority of how many movies now are freaking comic book movies? Way too many of them.
All of them.
Way too damn many of them. Bad, good, whatever.
Yeah, that reminds me. I'm sad that we're not doing a normal episode today because I want to talk about The Lighthouse, but that's not going to be leaving my brain anytime soon, so I'll talk about that.
No, there we go. That movie lives rent-free in my head, too.
Oh, God.
We'll have plenty to talk about next proper episode. But yeah, comic book games is our theme. But first, hit us up with some funny news.
All right, so I don't know if you remember, I think it was a couple of years ago, a scientist discovered a new protein and decided as a huge nerd scientist who is geeky and nerdy and in the pop culture, would name the protein Sonic Hedgehog.
I do remember Sonic Hedgehog, yes.
You do remember this. Good. Mm-hmm. Excellent, because this makes it so much funnier now.
Okay.
I have to pull up the article so that I can... I thought I already had it up. Sorry for the wait. It's super worth it, everyone. I feel like some people, if you listen to the... If you listen to the Castle Super Beast podcast, you already heard about this. And this shit made me lose my mind earlier.
Now let's hear it.
Alright, so first, you're familiar with erectile dysfunction, right?
Yeah. I mean, not that I can say I've ever experienced it myself, but
you're
I'm
aware
familiar
of
with the
fact that it
condition,
exists.
yes.
Did you know that they may have found one of the reasons for erectile dysfunction, and that might be a lack of Sonic the Hedgehog?
No way.
Mm-hmm.
No way.
I shit you not. Sonic Hedgehog.
So a lack of the Sonic Hedgehog protein
kind of causes erectile dysfunction in diabetic cases and some other thing. I don't remember what it was right now. Postanal differential. I'm trying to find it. It's like something about the prostate and also just erectile dysfunction. So lack of Sonic the Hedgehog may make you erectile dysfunction.
Well, I mean, good for all the people who've been jerking their dicks to Sonic for like how many decades now?
There no problems there.
No, I suppose not. They must have extremely healthy prostates.
I can't believe this though, because the amount of things that had to fall into place for Sonic Hedgehog to be the cure for erectile dysfunction.
Or like the key to erectile dysfunction.
Well,
Holy
I mean, the cure
shit.
technically, because if you just start taking Sonic Hedgehog proteins, you go big.
Holy fuck.
Isn't it fucking like the amount of like they had to find this protein, right, which was like a couple of years
must be
ago.
so happy right now. That's all I have to say. Holy shit. I can't fucking believe it. That doesn't sound real.
It's
honestly sounds like a sick joke, quite frankly.
You'd think it was, but there's many articles. When was this posted? Hold on, I gotta find the date. I think it was earlier this week.
Holy shit. Oh, fuck, that's funny. Christ. I can't fucking believe it. That's insane.
God, no, hold on. There's shit going back to... That can't be right. When was Sonic Hedgehog
discovered?
A
couple years ago, or at least named a couple years ago.
Okay, because there's articles, there's linked articles back to like 2003, which sounds wrong.
I mean, there were Sonic fans in 2003. I don't know what they were playing, but they existed.
No, yes, of course, but I mean the protein. I'm talking about the protein because
I guess somebody got the chance to name it, so they were just like Sonic the fucking Hedgehog.
Oh yeah, and I guess they had to update the maybe medical.
That's so funny.
Or some shit. I don't know, but
Sonic fucking Hedgehog.
And even if it is fake, I don't care. It's real. Shut up. Don't tell me. I don't want to know.
The blue blur will feed your boner.
Oh, God.
That's wonderful. You know what? Sometimes the universe aligns in mysterious and comical ways.
It's hilarious. I lost my mind. I was laughing so hard.
I'm honestly trying not to peak the audio by like just guffawing, but I'm trying to keep it as cool as I possibly can. That's really fucking funny.
It's
oh shit.
You're just like,
that's amazing.
Especially like as a Sonic fan, I'm like, that's yay! Everyone who doesn't play Sonic has erectile dysfunction. Losers. That's what you get for hating on Sonic Adventure 2. That's right, come at me.
Oh my god.
I will die on this.
You know, this is not as bad or incomplete a segue as you would think, because quite honestly, video games and comics have like a really symbiotic relationship.
Yep.
They're constantly feeding each other, and one of the longest running comics for a really long time was the Archie Sonic comics.
The Archie Sonic comics, which are very, very, very good, and actually
probably one of the reasons why the fandom in the United States is as dedicated as it is, because it ran for such a long time.
Yeah, you could argue for North America, because like we get them here too. I have
specifically for North America, because the UK had their own Sonic comic that's not the same.
And it's not as good.
I disagree. I think it's better.
Oh, really?
Yeah, way better. I listened to a whole podcast dedicated to it, so...
I haven't read much of it, so...
It's, I've read a bunch of Sonic the Comic now. It's very good. Oh, I mean, here's the thing. Sonic the Comic was mostly written by people who worked on 2000 AD. So people who were writing, like, Judge Dredd and shit were also writing Sonic comics. People like Mark Millar worked on it. It's a different comic culture. It's a different format. But anyway, the symbiotic relationship between comics and video games is pretty well documented, especially considering that like some of the earliest video games were based on comic book characters, you know, be they superheroes or otherwise. Or superheroes were the inspiration for a bunch of characters in video games. I mean, a really interesting correlation of comics and video games is like the connection between classic cartoons and video games, right? Popeye was hugely inspirational to the design of Donkey Kong, which is one of the most influential and popular games of all time. Like Miyamoto wanted to make a Popeye game, and he was like, okay, so what if I had olive oil taken by Bluto up like this construction thing based on this old cartoon of Popeyes where Bluto takes olive oil up to the top of this like construction skyscraper like that's in the middle of being built. And you know, Popeye goes up and saves her, but they couldn't acquire the license to the Popeye characters from King Features Syndicate, so instead he reskinned it with his own characters, who were pretty loose correlations to the characters, but still you can see the connection between Mario and Popeye, both working class dudes, you know? Olive Oil and Pauline, pretty similar, all, you know, in terms of
not necessarily design, but just narratively.
And it's not too hard to see how Bluto, who's a big brute, becomes a giant gorilla. You know, it's not a difficult correlation, but not
at all.
I mean, comic books have always been fodder for video game creators to take ideas from.
I mean, I think talking about the early animation shit and like it weird looping back to video games in Kingdom Hearts 2, and I think you know where this is going, is the Old Town Mickey level, like the old black and white.
It's called
Mickey.
Timeless River.
Which was one of the more standout levels to me, because I was like, this is so cool that we've come from like, because Mickey Mouse, like that story's been like kind of interpreted, and like Mickey has his own video games and shit, and now it's just kind of looping back to bringing it back to the OG Mickey Mouse shit, and you're like, oh cool, I fucking love this. And it had some of the best like mini games and like side missions in that entire game. Personal opinion, obviously, and also like,
I'd say that's pretty. I think a lot of people would share that.
I mean, I haven't played. I haven't played KH2 in some time. I'm getting back to it though because I've actually recently.
I mean, in
KH1.
3 they even did an elaboration on that where they had those Game and Watch style games.
Yeah.
Featuring Sora in an art style that looked like the Game and Watch, but also kind of a mix of the Timeless River art.
You had to unlock them by like finding them, and then they were just kind of like bonus shit, and it was very really cool. I thought they were super cool. I didn't play much of them because
interesting.
I was like, I want to get through this goddamn story, and then Aqua says, Aqua says he did it. He awakened Kingdom Hearts, and I went, yeah, they said it. Roll credits.
And then I teared up and cried.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say, another interesting thing about comics and video games is at the time that gaming was kind of coming into its own as a medium and kind of starting to really show the world what it was all about, the comic book medium was also picking up again in terms of sales and popularity. Like recovering from like a decades long stigma that had existed in popular media that kind of came from Frederick Wortham's book, The Seduction of the Innocent, which is like a hugely controversial book written by a psychologist named Frederick Wortham, who posited that comic books were like the reason for, you know, youth delinquency and violent crime even to an extent. And this, of course, was totally false, but it ruined the public's perception of comic books for a long time, and the Comics Code Authority was created. Independent comics started coming out that, you know, didn't abide by the Comics Code. And all of this kind of stuff, you see it echoed in the way that video games were treated later on, right? Like you see this correlation of a medium that's disrespected by popular culture, treated as childish because people see it as a threat. New media is always seen as a threat to old established media, right?
Yeah.
And oftentimes people look at it with suspicion or demonize it or try to delegitimize it as a medium for art and for creativity by saying that it's the cause of delinquency or violence, or it incites violence. This is conversations we are still having about video games today. I mean, the idea of the Comics Code Authority being created to quote unquote regulate comics, the comics industry regulating itself, is something that we see echoed in the video game industry when the SRB is created.
Yes, and kind of not to point fingers and be like, this obviously inspired more comics. You have Civil War, which is kind of a same idea of that shit.
Yeah, of people of comic book characters regulating one another's actions.
Yeah,
like these are things that had a big impact on the culture of these mediums. The culture of an M-rated game now just being a thing that exists, and adult comics being a thing, independent comics being a thing. What I guess we're trying to get at too is that these two mediums have a very symbiotic relationship, and I mean, you can see it just reflected in the amount of games that were being made just early on in any of these, the earliest game consoles' life cycles that were taking inspiration from comics or about comic book superheroes like Spider-Man or Batman. Look at the NES, for instance. We had one of the earliest hits for the thing. I think it came out in 97, if I'm not mistaken, is the Batman game by Konami. That's a really great game. The Batman NES game, and I know that it's based on did that come out in, I don't know now, did that come out in 87? I might have come out in 89 when the Batman movie came out. Let me see. Batman NES. Now when did this lovely thing come out? Batman on the NES was released in 1989. Sorry, I said 87. But yeah,
how dare you?
And I said it was Konami. It's Sunsoft. I really fucked that one up. Sorry, guys. I've never owned the game. I've only played
it is
via and, scary emulators.
Actually, as someone who's just recently been getting into like figures and shit, I believe NECA has a very good retro Batman figure, which is like just the colors of the NES Batman, but like
that's really cool.
Yeah, NECA has a bunch of those. They have the Jason one, they have the Alien one. Anyway,
I saw those.
I'm not gonna rant about those too much.
I really like the Freddy Krueger one.
Yeah, the Freddy Krueger one's ridiculous.
That bright ass color palette. Same thing with Jason. Love it. But yeah, no, that Batman game on the NES is like a solid adventure game. It's really difficult. It's a really complex platformer that brings to mind like Castlevania of all things in terms of how it plays, like how the controls are, mildly stiff, though I find the difficulty of the Batman game a lot more manageable versus the OG Castlevania, which I think is made almost with an arcade mentality.
Yeah.
It feels like an arcade game, and that it's Konami, constantly trying to fuck you out of the money that
of course.
you paid for it.
It's a Ghosts and Goblins situation.
Yeah, exactly. It feels too much like it was manufactured for an arcade. It was back in the time, though, when developers were still trying to figure out how to differentiate a console game from an arcade game, and not everybody got it right on the first try. A good example being the Mario Brothers turning into Super Mario Brothers is like such a transformative development cycle. It changes entirely the context of that game, even though it's still the same characters, still have a similar kind of appeal, but it's not an arcade title anymore. This is a console title. Console does different things. But that Batman NES game sets a pretty good precedent for comic book games moving forward, and not all of them are perfect. In fact, quite a few of them are very bad. But into the 90s, you start to see the popularity of comic books going up, the speculator boom, which is this big thing in comics that happened where people were starting to speculate on like the value of new comics moving forward. So they were creating a lot of things like variant covers and doing a lot of big crossovers. And so, in the spirit of this era, you get a lot of great video games that are crossover of a bunch of different characters. And I think one of the most notable and well liked would probably be the Marvel vs. Capcom titles, of the titles that Capcom made adapting Marvel comics.
The what? What are those? I've never heard of them.
Who knows? Have we ever heard about these MVC games?
No, I don't know what Marvel vs. Capcom is.
But I mean, it starts off right with X-Men: Children of the Atom.
Yes,
which is
technically. Okay. Yes. No. You're right.
Yeah.
Actually,
Children of the Atom is the first game that Capcom makes. I think that's based on an X-Men game. Was the first one?
It's the first fighting game.
Children of the Atom is the first fighting game. They made an earlier beat 'em up, right?
Christ. Yes.
Yeah.
Which is called.
They made a beat 'em up. I think it's just called X-Men.
No, it's X-Men something. It's not Children of the Atom. God, hold on, I'm gonna have to Google.
I'm pretty sure it's just X-Men, isn't it?
I don't think so, because
it is. SNES. It is. It's just called X-Men from 1992, and it's based on Pride of the X-Men, the pilot for the cartoon that never got made.
No, it's called X-Men Mutant Apocalypse.
Oh, I'm thinking of the Konami X-Men game.
Oh,
pardon me.
Because this is.
I said this was Capcom. This is not a Capcom game. This is a Konami game. Look at me. I know so much.
And actually, this isn't. This is Capcom. But yes. So yes, I was right. You were wrong. Ha 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 ha. No, but yes, there was the Konami games, but I was specifically referring to Capcom. And this was in 94, so 2 years after the Konami one. Don't know why Marvel decided not to work with Konami anymore. They seem like such a good company to work with.
I mean, at the time they were, at the very least. I think it was mostly they were looking for a different take on the series. I mean, they had a bunch of developers working on Marvel games at once because the licensing rights were fucking everywhere, and Marvel was not the company that had it all together like they are now. They were not owned by Disney. They were, in fact, owned by the company that made their toys, Toy Biz. Which is insane.
Oh my god! Are you serious? I never knew that.
Yeah. So Marvel was owned by Toy Biz, which is and Marvel had a bunch of different production arms and subsidiaries, which is how all those movie rights got shipped off to different places. They were pretty much on the edge of bankruptcy.
Well, yeah,
for a really long time, teetering there.
Just the fact that they were owned by Toy Biz, even though Marvel is fucking Marvel, right? And now being like Marvel was, Marvel's owned by.
Disney now.
Disney, yeah. So like,
but the Disney buyout kind of saved Marvel from succumbing to total bankruptcy.
Yeah.
And now they have
that's the thing.
Money and they can do whatever they want forever with basically no repercussions.
Marvel's been struggling for like a minute.
Yeah, no, especially up to this point. Throughout the 80s, they had a lot of successful cartoons. And one of the most successful cartoons came in, kind of at the tail end of the 80s into the early 90s, and that was the Saban X-Men cartoon. That show was a fucking huge hit. I mean, the X-Men comics were the Marvel comics of the 90s. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It was X-Men and Spider-Man. That was Marvel's selling point. Nobody was reading pretty much anything else. So you get your X-Men comics by Claremont and John Byrne, and you have your Spider-Man comics, many of which are not good from the 90s, but nonetheless iconic, like the Clone Saga.
Yeah.
And all of these things, you bet they all got video games. Mm-hmm. All of them. All of them. And most of them not very good, with the exception of these Capcom fighting games. There is a Sega Genesis X-Men game that came out that is a very bad beat 'em up. It's kind of like a action platformer with beat 'em up elements. Stinks. It's so bad.
It's true.
It's a Genesis game. It was developed in-house by Sega.
I want to say
pretty weak.
To be
pretty
fair.
Weak title.
Uh-oh.
That's the telephone.
That is the telephone. What's going on?
I hate it when it rings during dinner time, and guess what time it is when we're recording?
It's dinner time. Welcome to we pulled back the veil. Real quick, while we're still on like the Spider-Man thing, because we're about to get into a more general Marvel situation. While we're still on early like comic book games, I can't pass by without saying, not a good game, but a game that holds a special place in my heart, of course, is being Maximum Carnage on the SNES, and also Separation Anxiety, which is probably still to this day, because I don't read much comics anymore.
Is that Spider-Man Venom Separation Anxiety?
Yes.
Yeah.
Separation Anxiety is probably one of my favorite things that they did with the whole symbiote.
Mm-hmm. In the 90s, that was the symbiote era of Spider-Man for a while, and then it became the clone era.
Yes, and then I fell off, and here we
Understandable,
are.
the Clone Saga stinks.
Yeah.
The Clone Saga fucking sucks. It's so bad.
When does Spider-Man kill Mary Jane with his radioactive sperm?
Oh, that's Spider-Man Reign. That's way later.
Yeah, okay.
That's like a one-off graphic novel where they were trying to replicate the success and tone of The Dark Knight Returns, but with Spider-Man.
Yeah,
they really fucked that one up. That was really awful.
Yeah, it's almost like if you try to copy someone else's thing that kind of was successful, it's like people are like, wow, you're just copying this thing that was successful and yours sucks.
Yeah, there's like a billion bad comic book games in the 90s, but a couple of the notable good ones would probably be those Capcom fighting games. So, of course, you have X-Men Children of the Atom, and then X-Men vs. Street Fighter, and then Marvel vs. Capcom.
Which, honestly, just to mark a pinnacle in the FGC, X-Men vs. Street Fighter, obviously I was a child and had no idea what the fuck was happening. I don't even know if I was born yet. I'm pretty sure I was, but
might not have.
I was not hanging out in arcades, right? So like, I'm not saying like, oh, I was there and it was the most. Amazing thing.
You came right out of your mom and just like sat straight down in like the fucking arcade seat and were like, I'm ready. Let's do this.
I mean, no, it wasn't that. It was more. I came out of my mom and started playing Mortal Kombat 2 immediately.
I mean, that's pretty accurate.
X-Men versus Street Fighter. I'm just
so X-Men vs. Street Fighter came out in the bygone year of 1996.
So I was.
You were definitely alive.
I was 3, and I don't think I've ever played it. But of course, in terms of FGC shit, where like it was like all these crazy crossovers are happening, and now we have like Blaze Blue Cross Tag, where you have fucking basically everything, which I'm going to talk about next week because I started playing
that game is like everyone's here. Everyone that's not a Nintendo character is here.
Heart is in that game from Arcana Heart.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And I saw that. I didn't know that until I started playing it with a friend, and I was like, oh my god.
The entire main cast of Ruby, fucking nuts.
Yeah, Ruby's in there, like everything.
Wild.
Anyway, whatever.
Wild.
We're diverting.
But we'll talk about Cross Tag Battle. But yeah, that game, I mean, the first one, X-Men vs. Street Fighter, just had most of the major cast of Street Fighter 2, and then pretty much all of the major X-Men and X-Men villains. So the roster was, Cyclops and Gambit, and you got Wolverine obviously and Storm, but then you also get Magneto and Juggernaut and
Yeah.
Sabretooth. And then for Street Fighter, you have exactly who you think. Cammy, Chun-Li, Dhalsim, Ryu, Ken, M. Bison, Zangief.
Yeah. And then
exactly who you think you would get.
For Marvel versus Capcom, you get Silver Samurai, which is no one talks about anymore.
Yeah, I think mostly because that character sucks.
I think, well, yeah, but
not in the game. Just as a general
yeah,
character,
it's just,
he's
fun
so
in the
boring.
game. I think he looks cool.
Yeah, he does look cool. He's literally a silver-colored samurai.
And like the thing too is like X-Men versus Street Fighter was such a huge thing in the FGC at the time, obviously, where it was like
I totally.
Are we
forgot.
gonna get a
the
Street
next
Fighter
game in the
versus
series
Mortal
was
Kombat?
actually, and it came out a year later, Marvel Superheroes versus Street Fighter, which is basically the same cast as the previous game.
Yes.
For the Street Fighter side, but instead of it being X-Men characters, it's a couple of X-Men characters and some Marvel characters that
Venom
people want to play
as.
Well, Shuma Gorath, Spider-Man,
who has
Wolverine,
not left
Hulk,
the Marvel
Omega
vs.
Red,
Capcom
Cyclops,
series
and
since his inception, by the way.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Except
then
for
you
Infinite,
get Marvel vs. Capcom.
Infinite,
Marvel vs. Capcom, hugely popular game, very, very well liked, but, it doesn't really hit pinnacle until MVC2.
Yeah,
MVC2 is kind of considered by a lot of people to be the benchmark of crossover fighting games.
And it's funny because MVC2's budget was so small.
Yeah, it is a game with a really, really large roster of characters.
Like,
and
if this
I
game...
think that's what most people remember more so than even the gameplay. Although the gameplay is fun,
the gameplay is very good.
People remember
the thing about
that roster is massive.
I will have to disagree there because people remember that the gameplay in MVC2 is busted, but that is why it's so good.
Well, that's the thing, right? It's
that coupled with the roster, obviously, which MVCI was lacking, and we've talked. I don't know how many times about MVCI, but
quite a few.
MVC2, that's the thing, is the roster is huge. You have Capcom characters in MVC2 that don't exist in Capcom games now. Like, you have Servbot as a playable character, who is a joke character.
You have Trombone.
You have Trombone. You have Ruby Heart. Ruby Heart, yes. Sorry.
Yeah, Ruby Heart. And then you get like a bunch of interesting choices from the Street Fighter games. Like Dan is in there.
Yes, Dan.
You don't really see
coming
Dan
back
in
in Street Fighter
V
things
going forward.
Unfortunately, no, because Dan is a fun, not a super high tier character in terms of tier lists, but like just a joke fun character that's really fun, kind of like.
And of course, because this came out right kind of at the tail end of the 90s, you get Morrigan from Darkstalkers. That's really fucking cool.
Who shows up in every MVC game?
Yeah,
because
that's
it's
really,
fucking
really
Morrigan.
Awesome.
I want QB
also
though.
like
QB needs to come back.
That would be really cool. But yeah, Sakura from Street Fighter, wonderful.
Yes.
You get Roll, like little girl Roll.
Yes, and she's another
broom.
like kind of toss away character where they're like, yeah, we'll put her in, but she's gonna suck, but like still cool.
Oh yeah, Jill from fucking Resident Evil, which pretty much was a new game at the time.
Yes. Also, just gonna say it now. Best character design for Jill is in MVC2. They totally ruined her in 3. We'll argue about the MVC3 art style eventually, probably today actually.
Maybe.
But I will agree that MVC3 Jill just ruined horribly botched character from design, because they used her Resident Evil 5 design, which has the like Las Plagas like heart thing clamped to her chest, and she's in the like horrible like skin tight suit. And there's the alt costume that she has in UMVC3 is actually her RE3 design, but it's like you perfected this with 2. Just give her a fucking Stars uniform. And make it like horribly bright.
Oh yeah.
Just do it.
And you can't really talk about comic book games with also fucking stupid phone. You can't talk about comic book games without talking about how many freaking Turtles games there were.
Turtles.
When like Teenage Mutant Ninja
Yeah,
Turtles
okay,
games.
yes. Yeah, it clicked as soon as I said turtles. I was like, oh yes, of course. Which
your
also
favorite
has
thing.
yes, which also has an amazing ass fighting game.
Yeah, a great tournament fighter. Yeah.
Literally busted on the level of MVC2, but just with a
so
smaller
fun.
roster.
So fun.
Yes, doesn't it introduce? I don't remember her name, but it's like basically Girl Shredder, like Shredder's daughter or something. Karai, yes.
Yeah, Karai. Yeah, she is in it, and I feel
She's
like
busted.
without stuff like MVC2, you don't really get future crossover fighting games like DC Universe vs. Mortal Kombat. Even stuff that's video game properties crossing over with one another. MVC2 really is the benchmark, and it all starts there. And it's just because people really thought that game was something else, and it appealed to people. Like nobody was talking about, there was a huge trend in the 90s with making tournament fighters.
Yeah.
But nobody was talking about Justice League Task Force, which is the Sunsoft Justice League tournament fighter, because it's not a good game. No, why would anybody give a shit about it? It's not good. It's not MVC. MVC is like, that's where you start getting really great comic book games. And going forward from there, like, there's comic book fighting games, of course, which we've spent a lot of time talking about already. Mm-hmm. But you also start getting a lot of interesting other kinds of Marvel games into the early 2000s. You get stuff like X-Men Legends, because X-Men were coming back in the movies.
Yes.
And the X-Men Legends games are very unique. They're top-down dungeon crawlers, kind of in the style of Diablo.
I was about to say,
with beat 'em up mechanics.
Not necessarily Diablo, because Diablo, you have the argument that there's loot that is dropped, and that's not necessarily the case in.
That's true. That's not really in X-Men Legends, but yeah, I guess you're not going
It's more of a. I would give it more of the Baldur's Gate PS2 game feel.
Well, even Baldur, yeah, I guess so, and yeah, they are RPGs.
Well, no, like the PS2 game is straight up the gameplay, because I think you're thinking of the turn-based top-down shit on early PC shit, but there's a Baldur's Gate game on the PS2, which I don't remember the name of. I think it's Baldur's Gate Eye of the Beholder.
Eye of the Beholder. I've never played that one. I've only ever played Dark Alliance.
It's very, very, very good, but it plays exactly like those X-Men games, where it's top-down, and it's basically a brawler.
Ah, okay. That's interesting. I've never actually heard of that. But anyway, yeah, these games were developed by Activision. And they were published by Activision. They're developed by Raven Software, who are an American developer. And the games were really well received. There's 2 of them, X-Men Legends 1 and 2, and eventually the series transitioned into Marvel Ultimate Alliance, which is seems to be the X-Men are like the in for a style of gameplay, and then once it's proven with the X-Men, they can do it with the rest of the Marvel universe.
Yeah, which is
X-Men Legends is pretty strictly an interesting, RPG with the ability to play multiplayer, but you take a party of characters into a dungeon and you clear it kind of through a mix of RPG, like stat building and character building mechanics, and beat 'em up gameplay. Yep. But the main character of the game is Magma, who's like an X-Man that they basically chose because she has no personality and no anything to go off of. So she's like kind of the main character in the story that serves as the audience surrogate.
Yeah.
And the rest of it kind of feels very much in step with kind of a mix between the comics and a mix between the early X-Men movies.
Yeah, I'm going to cut you off for just a second. I'm going to go pee because it's
sure.
bad. And then we will continue this. It won't be long. Oh, God. All right. Hello. I'm back. Sorry about that. It was an emergency.
Don't worry about it. So yeah, the story of the game is kind of a mix between the movies. In fact, like they even cast Patrick Stewart as Professor X in it, which is a big get for a game in the year 2004. But the rest of the cast is pretty good. Tony Jay playing Magneto, great casting. The first time that Steve Blum ever plays Wolverine, who is now like pretty much the voice of Wolverine in all non-film media.
Yeah.
And rightfully so, because he's an excellent Wolverine. But that's pretty cool that kind of all starts with the Legends games, and then you get the Ultimate Alliance games later on, which really, I think, are the first time, in my opinion, that the Marvel Universe feels represented properly in a video game series. So that's very unique, and it's honestly not something we've seen since. I don't think there has really been that great of a Marvel game that encompasses like the whole universe of characters since the Ultimate Alliance games. And people don't love the Ultimate Alliance games the way they love X-Men Legends, which I understand. I don't think they're as refined. They don't feel as they don't feel as directed as those other games. Like they feel a little more all over the place.
I never really liked at all. Yeah. But that's just because it's not the style of game that I like to play.
That's fair. But now Ultimate Alliance has just kind of made a resurgence on the Switch, and a lot of people like it.
3? I think.
Yeah,
and
Ultimate Alliance 3.
They had that DLC pack that had
a bunch of the X-Men and the Fantastic Four.
Yeah, but also, what was his name? The Moon character? White Moon?
Moon Knight.
Moon Knight, yes. Thank you.
Yeah, who people love.
Yes.
Moon Knight's it was the Marvel Knights pack because it came with Moon Knight and Daredevil. But, it's pretty cool to see those games make a comeback. But I guess what's most interesting about all of this stuff is that, like, you see how Marvel was the company that was really driving the direction of great video games up to a certain point, and then, and that's not even to mention all the Spider-Man games, but I feel like those almost don't count because a lot of the Spider-Man games that people can spend a lot of time talking about, like Spider-Man 2, are very much based within the movie universe.
Yeah, that's the same.
I don't feel they're trying to capture the spirit of the comics.
The only one which I think
the only one is Ultimate
over,
Spider-Man.
Yes, yep. Which I was like, we should just skip over anyway because the GameCube boys took care of that. So if you want to hear about Ultimate really Spider-Man,
you want to hear about Spider-Man games, go and listen to the GameCube Was Cool podcast. They just did a very good episode on Spider-Man games
super in depth,
GameCube.
and I actually just recently restarted playing after listening to the episode, playing my N64 version of Spider-Man. Yep.
And might I also recommend, if you've not listened to it yet, the Spider-Man game episodes of Retronauts, which are very, very good and go through kind of a light history lesson on Spider-Man's history up to the point in which games started being made, and kind of going through the variety of different weird things they stuck Spider-Man in. So those are pretty good. There's a 2-part episode of Retronauts, so you can go check that out too. But we don't need to spend more time talking about Marvel and Spider-Man because now we get to talk about my favorite comics.
Marvel vs. Capcom 3. I mean, wait, no, sorry.
No.
I
We're going to talk about DC. What the fuck were DC up to when all of these good games are coming out?
Oh, let's go.
Not much. Basically, they were having more success than Marvel in the realm of things like, say, TV animation. But they really couldn't seem to crack games up until
Mortal Kombat versus DC.
Up until Mortal Kombat versus DC Universe, which, as I stated previously, is a game that probably wouldn't exist without MVC2. So we had to talk about that first.
It would not.
Now, Mortal Kombat versus DC Universe, in itself, kind of not that good for a lot of reasons.
On paper, amazing idea. I remember when this game came out. I remember it blew my goddamn mind. I'll be fair. Same, because obviously I had played.
You're a big Mortal Kombat fan.
I loved Mortal Kombat. I was playing all the Mortal Kombat games on my GameCube at the time, and like my brother got the game on. I think it came out on the PS3, if I'm correct, right?
Yeah, it did come out on PS3.
Okay, so it was the PS3 era. Yes. So it was like Xbox 360, PS3. I was busy playing Skyrim. I wasn't much into fighting games anymore at the time, and then I've had a resurgence recently.
And then suddenly somebody told you could fight Batman and Scorpion.
It was less than that, actually. I remember my brother getting it for Christmas, actually, and me being like, "Oh, they're trying to do the Marvel vs. Capcom 2 thing." I bet that'll go good, because I remember also being like, because I mean that's the thing, right? Like I knew how Marvel vs. Capcom played. And that was my preferred style fighting game. I love Mortal Kombat, don't get me wrong, but NetherRealm Studios has, especially with Mortal Kombat, the block button sucks. It's a passe feature that was implemented to balance the game for things, and it's still implemented to balance the game for like certain moves.
So what you're saying is you were like, NetherRealm Studios making a game with DC Comics characters? Pff, it'll never take off.
Yeah, and guess what?
It fucking did.
How old was I? Maybe like 16-year-old Ben was wrong, but also right.
You were wrong and right in many ways.
Yes.
I mean, first and foremost,
it was. I'll take it. I'll take that 50-50.
Mortal Kombat versus DC Universe, not a great game. It kind of looks like shit.
Myriad
it kind of plays like bad Mortal Kombat.
It looked fine at the time.
They took out the ability to do fatalities on certain characters and with certain characters. The game feels kind of spayed and neutered in a way that an MK game shouldn't.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. It's like you have all these Mortal Kombat characters which are very violent and blah, 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 and they just fucking murder people. And then you have Warner Brothers being like, well, we can't have Batman murder people.
It literally goes against his philosophy. Same thing with
Superman. Cut to Rob Schneider's Batman versus Superman movie. Whatever.
Rob Schneider?
Rob Schneider. Jesus Christ, every time.
Rob Schneider's Batman versus Superman.
In a different universe, it would have been so good. Zack Snyder. Every time. I don't know why. Every time I think of Zack Snyder, I just think of Rob Schneider.
They'll just go out and have Batman say, yeah, I love Trump. Just like Rob Schneider.
Yeah.
But,
God,
the one, we get one
Zack
Trump
Snyder.
joke.
Anyway,
one
whatever.
Trump joke per episode.
Mm-hmm.
But,
stop the count. Anyway.
Stop the count, everybody. But yeah, I have to say that, you know, they've kind of softened a little bit on what they're letting creators do with these characters.
God, I hope that's not the Instagram clip for this week.
It might be. But I have to say, there's something quite interesting about the direction they took these characters, in which I think they correctly gleaned that the idea of pitting the DC universe against characters that were more violent and more extreme is a good way to kind of create conflict and give these characters a reason to fight.
Yes.
Because the DC characters overall, and you know, maybe this seems funny to people who mostly know them through popular media like movies, I feel like the DC characters overall are hopeful, aspirational characters that are representative of the best, and in case of the antagonist, the worst that humanity can provide and offer.
Yeah.
And the idea of a character like, say, Superman going up against these nihilistic, edgy 90s characters like so many of the MK games characters is a great idea.
Yeah, like Melina.
But maybe the direction they took with this didn't fit.
Mm-hmm.
So they went back to the drawing board, cut to a couple years later, out comes Injustice Gods Among Us.
Which I was very excited for, but decided to skip.
Injustice is I think that was your mistake, because that is a really good fighting game.
Yes, and like it was on sale recently, and I still skipped it because I was like, MK11 exists.
Yeah,
I'd rather play a Mortal Kombat game.
I can't think of a thematically better fit gameplay wise for a fighting game based on the DC characters than having like a game that works off of mostly the engine from Mortal Kombat.
Yes, and like real quick, you've played Injustice, so you know this, but for viewers who haven't played either
stiff combat and control style feels right in the hands of these characters who are just fucking powerhouses.
But also the thing with Injustice is like my main problem with Mortal Kombat, which again comes down to move decision, and like it makes sense as it's in Mortal Kombat. It's just I play so many fighting games that hold back is block. That a block button always throws me off. That's why I have a hard time with Soul Calibur. But
Soul Calibur is on a different plane too in terms of how it plays, because it's a 3D arena fighter.
It's Tekken with a block button essentially.
Mm-hmm.
But
it's weapons based Tekken. It's like Tekken meets Samurai Showdown.
It has 2B, and 2B is great.
Oh god, yeah.
Oh god, it has 2P, which is just black 2B, and you're like, yes.
I like this.
This is great.
But yeah, you were saying about Injustice.
Yes, Injustice has hold back to block, which means NetherRealm Studios has acknowledged that this is the superior way to go, but they've also said like it's just tradition at this point for Mortal Kombat to have a block button. And there's moves that like in Mortal Kombat games are
executed with the block.
Or not holding the block, because sometimes the block can fuck you up, because there's projectiles that will go over your head if you're not blocking but crouching, which leaves you the opportunity to open up the opponent, whereas if you're blocking, it'll push you back and then you can't jab right, and start your
Yeah.
combo. So like there's a whole mind game thing there, and it's I can respect that it has its place in Mortal Kombat, but it's also one of my biggest problems with Mortal Kombat.
Yeah.
It's just
And
because it's something I'm so not used to.
oh
It's
yeah.
just having to like press a button to be blocking. So
But
it's
yeah,
hard to wrap my head around. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just one of the things that I personally take issue with in Mortal
yeah.
Kombat games. And
So yeah, on the flip side of all of this, or actually, before I say that, I do want to say something else notable about Injustice is that more so than MVC or any of those games, it's really reliant on its story mode,
yes,
which I think to me is the most important thing of any of the Injustice games, because not only does it provide these characters justification to fight, but they create a really interesting and well executed conceit, which is the whole idea of a mirror universe with parallel versions of the characters who
yeah.
are
Well, I mean,
more extreme, more beaten down, and more brutal.
see, that's the thing. I don't know much about DC, and I'm gonna track back in a second before well after we do all this because I want to talk about Sub Zero's ending in MK versus DC because it's my favorite thing ever. But for the Injustice series, essentially what I wanted to ask is I know there's a Injustice line of comic books. Is that
There
based
are.
off the game or is it
So yes,
before
that's
the
the
game?
thing. The game in the end, this notion of the game with its story and original takes on these characters proved to be so popular that DC has kept for
Okay.
a long time now a long-running Injustice comic book that has run
That's
since the first game
amazing.
came out
So
and has been going ever since, and it's been released in a myriad of different ways for free online,
yeah,
exclusively through digital
yeah,
retailers, stuff like that. But
DC.
you can buy physical compilations of them.
Hmm.
But there's Injustice comics that deal with like every year leading up to the first Injustice game, and then afterwards every year leading up to the second Injustice game. So showing the events that these characters went through in the interim to
Yeah,
get to these points that they are in the games, because these games are so story intensive.
yeah,
And the thing that I like that they did is that for the people that are unfamiliar mostly with DC characters or know them solely through more extreme media interpretations like the Zack Snyder movies, for
yeah.
instance,
Or the animated series, even from like the
the
90s.
animated series, even exactly, these characters provide a really great these versions of the characters provide a great compromise because they mostly get like a lot of notable voice actors from the animated series to come and play the characters. I mean, Kevin
Yes.
Conroy is playing Batman.
Yeah.
George Newbern is playing Superman.
Which
That's
I
all
think
fine
is
and dandy.
essential if you're going to be trying to sell this product. Because
Yeah.
if you boot up the
Oh, it's
game
Sue
and the
Eisenberg
person
plays
doesn't
Wonder
sound
Woman,
like
I
the.
believe, too.
Yeah. If you boot up the game and the person who you're playing doesn't sound like the person who you saw on the TV show, you're going to be like, what the fuck?
Exactly. But they also do this really cool thing where they present to you, because they have this conceit of it being two parallel versions of the same DC universe going up against each other, you get to contrast how the heroes in one universe behave versus how they behave in the other, and see that there are these characters that embody the darker aspects of the character that you might be more familiar with, or the more lighthearted aspects of the character that you might be more familiar with. There's two characters that contrast one another to show that, like, this is still Batman. This dark, brooding vigilante is still the practical, detective. They're
Hmm.
still the same character. It's just two sides of the same coin, and different circumstances bringing out these different parts of their personalities to more prominent prominent roles in the story. So that's really, really cool. And I really admire, as just a fan of the comics and those characters, how they were able to do that. And Injustice 2 came out. That's a good game as well. But I feel like these games are Injustice games. I think it's pretty fair to say they're all like M-rated. They're pretty
Yeah.
squarely for older teenagers into young adult kind of age demographic.
Hmm.
If you want to play a fun children's Marvel game or a DC game, you have a lot of options, and I feel like the Lego games are really like the best children's games you could think of that involve these comic book characters, because you have games like Lego Marvel Superheroes, Lego Marvel Superheroes 2, Lego Marvel Avengers, super fun games that just like tell a really great madcap story that involves pretty much the whole of the Marvel universe,
Hmm.
and has everybody from the X-Men and the Fantastic Four showing up to team up and play with one another and just have a good kind of rollicking time story-wise. And similarly, there's Lego Batman games, which came first, and have 4 titles in the series as Lego Batman's 1 through to 3, and then Lego DC Supervillains, which is just a Lego Batman game, but the focus of the story has shifted to the villains. And all of these games do such a great job of embodying like the spirit of the characters as many kids would know them and be familiar with them. And they tell really fun stories that, like I say, encompass the whole of their comic book universes. It play around a lot with lore and deep cut characters that serve as unlockable playable characters later on. They let you play as a billion characters, each with their own different kind of power sets. They're usually open world, at least these Lego Batman 3 and DC Supervillains, and then both the Lego Marvel games and Marvel Avengers. Those games are all open world, and they take place in large, pretty expansive comic book universes. Like DC Supervillains has a huge open world map that encompasses all of Gotham City, all of Metropolis, Smallville, Slaughter Swamp, the Wayne Manor, and the Batcave. Yeah. And all of Apocalypse too. When you go to Apocalypse later on in the game, it's a whole separate open world area. So that's pretty awesome, right? Like, that's not something that you would expect them to do for a children's game. But they really went all out. So I think that those Lego games are just like, are a great kind of opposite side of the coin from these like violent fighting games and beat 'em ups and stuff that skew more towards a teen demographic. You know, for kids who just want to have fun with these comic book superheroes, there are these other games too that are just as good. You know? They're just good to a different degree, and they're for a different audience. But I feel like now we've spoken a lot about superhero comics. Let's move away from those for a little bit, because obviously
before
when
we
people
move
think
away
comic
from
books,
those, I have to talk about the Sub-Zero ending in MK versus DC.
Oh, please do.
Or else it will plague me for the rest of the episode, and then I'll forget about it. But so you go through Sub-Zero's arcade mode in MK versus DC, and he gets so inspired by Batman that Sub-Zero himself becomes a Batman.
No way.
Yes.
No
you
way.
can look this up.
Really?
It's the funniest shit. Yes, he's so like, he's such a Batman fanboy that he's like, I'm gonna go back to my world and treat the fucking, like, just, I live in the night. And like, he gets super edgy. I don't remember exactly what his monologue is, but it's hilarious. And it stuck with me for like so long because it's so funny. I think, what's the easiest way? God, I don't remember. I think Yo Video Games has a video on the endings, and they might have one where it's the Sub-Zero ending, where like it's a cut, like, because it's a fighting game story mode and it's not a very good one, so obviously it's just a artist rendition, like what is it, concept art of Sub-Zero sitting on a gargoyle like Batman. And then there's just the monologue text going over it of being like, I was inspired by Batman so much that blah, blah, blah. I will defeat evil in my world and blah, blah, blah. And you're like,
how did I not know about this? How did I forget that this happened?
You may have not beat Sub-Zero's arcade mode. That might have just been it.
Oh my god! That's so funny!
Because Sub-Zero was my favorite character for a while.
That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy.
And so when my little brother got this game, I played through Sub-Zero's arcade mode on the PS3. Yes, the PS3. And like got that ending, and that's when I went, okay.
That's wild.
Because it like, as a like.
That is the most like wish fulfillment fan fiction ass ending you could possibly create.
Like, however old I was like, this is stupid, blah blah blah. But then remembering it a few years later, I was like, you know what? Fuck it. That's actually
the coolest shit ever.
That's fucking sick.
That's really really sick.
Yeah.
But yeah. So anyway, let's move away from the superhero comics, because that's a large part of the comic book industry, and it's what everybody thinks about. But indie comics are a huge deal too. And non-superhero comic books as well have provided like a really substantial basis for a lot of popular games. And I feel like just a couple that come to mind are Scott Pilgrim, and the Scott Pilgrim comic book series obviously very heavily indebted to video game culture in terms of its aesthetic and story.
What?
There's a billion video game references. It's literally kind of a video game transplanted into comic book form, and the world operates on fun video game logic.
Yeah,
so
even
naturally,
even if you haven't read the comic books and you've seen the movie, you know this.
It's exactly. So naturally, there had to be a Scott Pilgrim game made at some point, and they did. They made it when the movie came out in 2010.
Yes.
And
then it
is a good game.
up until this year.
Yeah, exactly, and fucking disappeared from all online retailers until just recently. But it's back out now on Switch. You can get it. It's a good game. It's a very difficult old style beat 'em up with a lot of kind of interesting little mini game elements thrown in the in between and during boss fights,
and a myriad of references that will beat you over the head.
Deep references, not just to the comic source material, but to the things that
video
inspired
games.
the comic.
Yeah. I wasn't even talking about the comic. I just meant video games in general.
It's such an intensive labor of love, and it's a very, very good game.
Yeah.
However, it is extremely difficult. But Scott Pilgrim is a perfect example of how independent comics were taking a lot from video games.
Yeah.
Comic creators were doing something really special with what they had. They played games, they grew up playing games, and now they're the ones making comics. So what do you think they're
the thing about it being difficult also is that it's a beat 'em up. Beat 'em ups in general are difficult.
Yeah.
That's the allure of beat 'em ups a bit. Is that it's all right, and it's kind of like fighting games, but more of a quarter muncher feel.
And Scott Pilgrim the plays a lot like a Final Fight or a Kunio-kun game.
Yeah, quarter muncher feel stayed specifically because it was we grew up playing these hard ass games. We expect them to be hard ass games. It's kind of like now how it's I want my games to be 500 hours long and have an open world where you can shoot anyone in the face.
Exactly. There's an expectation from a player base now of what makes a game substantive.
Yeah, could you imagine if Rockstar released a game now where the map was as big as the Vice City?
No,
map?
They would be laughed at.
No one would buy it. People would not buy it on the principle just that the map is that small.
And it wouldn't have to matter really how intensive, the map design was, because they wouldn't see it as say a Yakuza game where the maps aren't huge, but there's so much to do.
I can't talk about Yakuza right now because I will go on a tirade. I can't talk about it right now. I don't want to talk about Yakuza.
Not yet.
Not yet. Next week, but because I have too much to say. That's the thing. Next week, there's fair. An entire hour dedicated to Like a Dragon. By the way, so if you're interested in Like a Dragon,
I want to listen to that because I want to play that game so bad.
What I will say right now of Like a Dragon is that it is the best Dragon Quest game I've ever played, and that if you want to get into the Yakuza series, it's a very good start.
Which is an interesting thing to say for a game that's a soft reboot of almost everything entirely.
Yeah, what are you talking? It's only the 18th game.
It's only the 18th game in the series. It's only the first game in the series to completely shift gameplay styles.
Not true, but we'll get into that when we talk about it. Yes.
Oh, okay. So
Did you know that there's a Yakuza zombie game?
I didn't actually.
Okay,
so
well, good.
We'll talk about that next episode. But yeah, suffice it to say, now with all these video game creators and independent video game, references in independent comics, naturally you're gonna get a lot of independent comics that inspire video games.
Yes.
So Scott Pilgrim's a good example. Another good one would be Fable.
And especially with such a nerd culture bleed over, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. I mean,
people
obviously
who read comic books,
nerds read comics and nerds play video games.
Yeah, that's the thing. And we're kind of past that now where we are in video games, but at the time that these games were kind of being made and the comic books were being made, during the games there was this weird wavelength of God, I don't remember what the term is for it, but when the two lines kind of cross and then diverge and then cross again and then diverge again.
Cross-cultural influence, basically.
Yes.
Yeah, or cultural crossover.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that is to say that you have stuff like The Wolf Among Us, which is based on the comic Fables, which is a great a series of adult independent comics.
Yes.
The creator-owned books put out by Vertigo. And that is like a really unique game because it's a point-and-click game that takes its story primarily from like maybe one of the least comic book premises of all time.
Yeah.
In that it's an investigative point-and-click adventure game where you play as a private detective who is kind of an avatar who represents the big bad wolf from, you know, all these fables and folktales that you hear about. You know, the same big bad wolf that, you know, bothers Red Riding Hood and bothers the Three Little Pigs.
Yeah.
That wolf at solving crimes in a community of fairy tale characters that live in New York City.
Yeah, which is
and
an amazing
premise. It is a hard-boiled detective story.
Yeah.
That takes itself pretty seriously for the most part.
Probably one of the better Telltale games, too.
Definitely one of the better I'd say up there with the Back to the Future game as being one of their more notable and good releases. Especially
I don't
with
know
the
much
Telltale
about the Back
Bleed
to the
later.
Future one. I remember seeing screenshots and being like, oh god.
It doesn't look great, but let me tell you, it is fun to play, and the story is good. I mean, literally my favorite movie.
I know season 2 of the Batman one is very good. I think
season 2 of the Batman one's good. Season 1 is poo poo caca.
Yeah, it's poo poo
caca. It's really bad.
Sources may have found this information
I think I've been quoted as saying maybe one of the worst Batman stories I have ever experienced.
Yeah,
so crap.
I played half of episode 1 and went, no, I want my money back.
It is embarrassingly
and I got my money back.
Bad. It is embarrassingly bad.
Yeah,
but the second game is much better. They took all the criticism to heart. It's also the last Telltale game.
Was it?
Pretty sure that second Telltale Batman was the last one. Oh, Minecraft Stories? Did that come out after Batman 2 though? I think that came out after Batman 1.
I'm not sure. I don't remember.
We're not. Anyway,
everything gets crossed up in my mind.
Telltale is pretty much is effectively dead now.
Yeah.
They're trying
Wolf
to
Among
not
Us
die,
2
but
is
dead.
apparently coming back.
I feel like that's not going to happen, but
I also feel like that's not going to happen.
But the Wolf Among Us, if it stays as is a standout comic book game. Like really, really excellent. It introduced a whole bunch of people in the gaming community who are not maybe into comic books into the world of Fables, and Fables is a great comic, like one of the all-time great independent comics.
Yeah.
And so I find it crazy to think that like it's just something that hasn't been mined more, like these Vertigo series that would be great video games.
Yeah.
Which I guess kind of brings me on to where I want to kind of end off for this episode, because we're getting into about an hour and bonus round shouldn't go much longer than this.
Yeah.
But I'd like to say, I feel like there's a lot of comic book properties that would make for a good game. And so I'd want to ask you, Ben, if there's any comic that you know of, or any comic book character that you would like to see get their own game, get its own game, what kind of game would you want? Like, what genre would you want it to be, and what character would you choose, or what book would you choose?
All right, I want a... All right, this came to my brain, and now I'm happy. I want a Yakuza-style version of a video game, and the protagonist is the Condiment King.
That would be wonderful.
Right?
Like a Batman style Yakuza game. Well, that would work surprisingly well, where you play as like Condiment King. Or I'm thinking, what if you had like all of the lame Batman villains are the main characters?
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, you have a notion that Batman exists, but you're off doing your own story as all these
maybe Batman
villains.
Intervenes in your story.
Yeah,
like he's like
near
the Majima,
end. Or like
he's like the Majima.
Oh my god, the Majima everywhere system. Oh my god.
Yeah,
he just pops out of dumpsters.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Throws a batarang at you, or like maybe if you don't avoid him, he sends you to jail and you have to restart. Like, you have to go and replan the mission and do it again.
Yeah, kind of a roguelike, kind of like a Katana Zero, but it would be like more of a Yakuza-style game.
There's so many good, stupid Batman villains that would honestly make for really fun characters to play as in a game, because Condiment King is one, Kite Man is another.
Yes,
Polka Dot Man.
Guy. Polka Dot, yes.
Yeah,
Polka Dot Man.
Polka Dot Man would be great. Zodiac Master, who has the stupidest power ever, which is he has a costume with the Zodiac signs on them, and he takes the signs off and throws them at people. That's his power?
I love that.
The Eraser, who is literally
even
like
just
a
the
giant
Riddler
pencil,
is kind of like the only like Z tier joke piece of shit that like stuck around for some reason.
Yeah, I feel like the Riddler is funny because he is kind of like this, like the Z tier Joker.
Yeah, he's just like, ha ha ha. Can you answer this? Ah, fuck, he did it. All right.
God damn it.
I guess I'll go to jail again.
That would be great. Or like Killer Moth, whose power is he is a man who has a stinging gun and he dresses like a big moth, which
Shocker!
is really fucking funny. He is kind of the Shocker of Batman, honestly, because he pretty much exists to just get punched by Batman. But so many of these lame Batman villains are great.
Of the comic to get the interest peaked.
There we go. So your choice would be a Yakuza-style game starring the shitty Batman villains.
Yes, or shitty Spider-Man villains like Shocker.
That'd be good too.
Like just like Z tier, who's like, I just rob banks. But that's also kind of Spider-Man's whole thing. Like I always hate it when Spider-Man gets this like end of the world like villainous shit because I'm like, but
yeah,
Spider-Man's
I like
he
my
takes care
squirrely
of
friendly
Manhattan.
neighborhood Spider-Man. Yeah,
kind of like how Daredevil's like he's Hell's Kitchen, and outside of
he's
that,
the devil
he's
of
like,
Hell's Kitchen. Yeah, it's
not
outside of his jurisdiction.
Yeah,
exactly. That is how I feel about Spider-Man 2, and I prefer my Spider-Man stories to be small scale.
Yeah,
although I don't mind when he fights a threat that threatens all of New York, to that degree, because he is New York superhero to me. Like, that's New York's hero.
Yeah.
But he is, first and foremost, friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. And I feel like whenever they take him out of there, it's always hit or miss.
Yeah, it's usually miss, honestly.
Sometimes it's miss. I feel like the few times it's been a hit have been, mostly flukes that have worked that would have worked regardless of the premise because everything else was well done.
Yeah.
Or, like, if they're doing it intentionally to write a Peter Parker that's, like, out of his comfort zone, then it can work. But sometimes, if they treat Spider-Man like every other superhero, he almost doesn't work.
I thought of another crazy, crazy...
Yeah, lay it on me.
Crazy idea that no one's ever thought of. I'm going to call it Marvel vs. Capcom 4.
Okay.
And I'm going to make it good. Right? Where, like, there's Wolverine's there. You have Magneto. You have Doctor Doom. You have Strider. Virgil. Nero even. Fuck it, Nero. You have V.
Okay, throw Nero.
Capcom, give me a call if you want to talk about this game. I know you've never done this before, but Marvel vs. Capcom 4. We're just going to start on the fourth one.
Yeah, that would be great.
Or Infinite 2, if you'd rather.
What's your choice for visual design? Going for the MVC3 look?
I would, honestly, you know what? I would 100% bring it back to sprites if it was my choice. I think sprites need to make a big comeback, but also Strive is doing good work. Guilty Gear Strive is doing good work.
I feel like if you could make an MVC game that looks as good as a modern Guilty Gear,
if you can make
you
MVC
wouldn't be doing
like
anything
the comic
wrong.
book version of Strive and not the manga version of Strive, which is what Arxis is doing, right? And like they started that.
Strive looks just like like a manga.
Yeah,
like it looks like a manga in motion.
And they started that with Dragon Ball FighterZ, and that's why FighterZ totally destroyed MVCI, because MVCI has good net play and plays fun. It's just the budget was horrible. They didn't follow up on DLC. They just dropped it like a fucking bag of rocks.
It looks so bad. Like I can't think honestly of a worse visual direction than the direction they took MVCI.
Nope.
It looks really bad.
And like as we keep teasing, we have our opinions about MVC3.
We do.
Wrong, but
once again,
we agree.
I'm honestly super willing to concede that MVC3 is better looking than most games. I feel like my hangups with MVC3's art design are purely from a personal standpoint because I have bad eyes that can only take so much visual stimulation.
Yeah, that's the thing. And that's like I think we've talked about this off of podcast too, where I was like, I get that, like, I also just
personal... my go-to joke is like the artists finally discovered what contrast was and just like, oh shit, and slipped the slider way too far on one end.
I can give you that on some stages, yes, 100%.
But that's, once again, it's personal hangups. I actually do like how that game plays, and I love the character roster.
Is the winter stage,
aka the stage that's easiest on your fucking eyes.
Yeah. So I'll give you that one.
The stage that has the least amount of black.
Yeah, I have a fond liking for the Days of Tomorrow stage because you just have the poster with like also Capcom characters on the
Hmm.
um, executed whatever like paper on the wall,
Yeah,
and also the New York stage because it's just a fucking parade, and then you get lifted into the air, and
there
you're
we
like,
go.
cool. But yes,
My choice for a comic book game would be, and maybe this is like, maybe this is a little too out there because it seems so ambitious, but I would, from the bottom of my heart, honestly love a full like Skyrim, Breath of the Wild sized, action adventure RPG in an open world with the characters of Bone. Do you know Bone?
I do know Bone.
So Bone is
Very like
Bone is one of my
um
favorite comics of all time.
I know Bone like through osmosis
I'm
essentially.
I love Bone.
My dad
I've
also
lo-
loves Bone,
Bone
so
is maybe one of the first comics I ever loved. I
fair
have
enough.
all of the I have all of the original print color editions from Graphics, the Scholastic ones that
Yeah,
came
yeah.
out, but I also have the black and white ones, and I have a bunch of other stuff by Jeff Smith. I Now I was hesitant to say Bone because I was just like, does Ben know
The
what Bone is?
Tick, I
I'm
do.
just gonna completely. I'm so happy you know what Bone is, but Bone, for people who don't know, is an epic fantasy comic that takes place in a valley that has kind of experienced a huge shift in like political and societal like culture from like a medieval society to like an agrarian backwater almost American West
Yeah.
thing in a real short span of time, and everything is fucked up and the world is crazy. There are dragons, there are ancient cults, there's a spirit called the Lord of the Locusts, which is trying to just completely destroy all life in this valley. And then out of nowhere, in the middle of this epic fantasy comic, you have three characters who walk right out of a newspaper comic strip.
Yep. This cute
And
little
they're so cute. They look like little Popeyes or little Mickey Mouses.
yeah, like very early animations, very early
Yeah,
comic shit too.
they're
Where
super cute. You feel like little Felix the cat looking
yeah,
motherfuckers.
yeah, yeah.
Honestly,
Felix the cat.
like they look like little babies, and they are operating off of this mentality that they're living in like a this goofy cartoon world with goofy cartoon understanding of the world
Physics
and
and
goofy
yeah.
cartoon physics and rules, and they are just thrown in the middle of this epic fantasy comic that is like extremely dark, not altogether always serious, but has pretty serious characters and serious consequences and stakes.
Mhm.
And I think that that would work so well as a large scale open world RPG. It would be so fun. And I know that Bone is getting a TV series on Netflix, so it's probably going to hit a big resurgence soon.
Yeah,
It
we'll
also
see.
did get it's an animated series.
Oh, okay. Good.
Well, wow, they can't do the Bone
Well,
characters in the live action.
you know, with all the things that have been happening, I don't know anymore. I hear this is getting a Netflix adaptation. I immediately go, "Oh God, is it real life?"
Well, it's an animated series,
Okay, well, good.
and
Um,
I think it's going to be good. But also, another cool thing is that Bone has already had video games. They had two actually.
oh, I did not know
Two
that.
point and click adventure games for the PC. Bone Out from Boneville and Bone 2 The Great Cow Race, which are both based on volumes 1 and 2 of the comic respectively.
Okay.
But they're interesting, they're fun, they're also primitive and from the early 2000s. And they're probably also the first time that those characters appeared in like full color with voices and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah.
So they're notable, but they're not necessarily great games.
Okay.
I feel like a large scale epic action RPG with good combat mechanics and exploration,
Like
survival
Yakuza
mechanics,
7?
even another Yakuza game, huh?
Um,
I honestly
I'm gonna
what I'm
I'm gonna
thinking
cut
of
you
mostly.
off. Sorry, I have to go pee really bad again.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
Yeah. Okay, hello. Sorry.
But yeah, a large-scale epic action RPG in the style of something like Breath of the Wild would really, really suit just the tone of Bone generally, because it's set in this world that's kind of a backwater. It's not necessarily post-apocalyptic, but there's a lot of hidden mysteries and undertones in this, castle ruins in the middle of this large valley world that's very full of monsters and things called rat creatures and all these different threats. I just feel like that would suit itself so well to a large scale game like that. And all of the Bone characters are so different. Like, you have characters like Thorn, who is the main human character in the series, and she can use a sword. And you have characters like Phonebone, who is the other main character, who is a bit of a goof, who's pretty much useless in terms of combat, but would be great for exploration as a character who explores things and is small and can fit into small spaces. And also serves as a great audience surrogate. Right? Yeah, main character. Yeah. He's a great audience surrogate, as are the rest of the Bone characters, because they're coming into this world with no knowledge of it.
Yeah, and they're like, what the fuck is going on?
They're like, what are we three characters who walked straight out of the Wizard of Id or something doing in the middle of freaking Lord of the Rings? So it's really, really excellent. I would love a Bone game. I know that there's a lot of Bone fans out there, mostly because Scholastic did a really good job of promoting it when it came out in color. Yeah. And it's now like a big thing for kids to grow up reading.
Well, I remember Scholastic having a bunch of ads for it. I opted for the how to draw DBZ, but
I feel like people our age, we were like the first generation to have Bone marketed towards us as a comic for children. Because prior to that, it was an Eisner Award-winning black and white comic series, primarily aimed at a niche audience, and it didn't have a big publisher like Scholastic behind it.
Yeah.
But yeah, once Scholastic got a hands on it, they put out those great color graphic novel editions. I have them sitting on my shelf. I'm looking at them right now. They just a huge promotional push. T-shirts, some toys even, which I have 3 of. I love Bone. And so I sincerely hope that one day, maybe after the show comes out, they will think of maybe putting a Bone game, because I feel like it could really work and it would lend itself so well. There's already Bone sequel novels that have been out for a long time that I haven't even read yet. So there's a whole bunch of aspects of this world that Jeff Smith seems really content to continue exploring. Why not get him to, create editions for it story-wise? To do art design, to create enemies,
Yeah.
I feel like that would be super cool. I don't know how into it Jeff Smith would be. I think he's just happy that he's seen so much success, because it was really like a really niche idea for a comic, and they took a risk on him, and he took a risk writing it, and it came out to be one of the most successful comic series aimed at a young audience ever. Especially because it's so mature and handles its mature subject matter with like a level of tact and intelligence that I wish more children's comics actually had.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it also, I think, inspired the boom of original graphic novels written for middle grade readers and teens. But anyway, all of this stuff is to say, Bone video game would be my dream comic book game. I feel like we can definitely do another episode following up on this one.
Oh,
because
definitely.
There's still so much to talk about, and we didn't even talk about comic book games from Japan, because manga is like a huge thing, and the manga industry and the games industry are pretty, especially the console gaming industry, are pretty inexorably linked, and there's a lot of stuff we could talk about there. But for now, I think we're going to
And there's also a Yakuza connection that I can make for a joke here, but
I mean, there is actually even more so. There is literally a game made by the people who made Yakuza based on a comic book that plays like Yakuza.
Yeah.
So there's a whole bunch of stuff we could talk about there, but I think we're going to leave it for tonight because it's an hour and 20 minutes in. It's almost as long as a regular GamePunx.
Yeah. I'll bring up the Yakuza joke that I was going to say next episode. So I'll see y'all next week.
Yeah.
Don't worry, I won't forget it, because
we're not going to forget about these
hard.
jokes. We're not hard. Ben is all full of Yakuza right now, so we're going to hear a lot about that next episode.
I'm full of Yakuza and BlazBlue Cross Tag.
I'm excited to hear all about that.
And after tonight, I'll be full of Tekken.
Oh boy. Your brain is just going to be Fighting Game Central, isn't it?
Yeah, it seems to just be leaning that way.
At least you're getting one RPG in.
It's the
because
best
now
RPG
Yakuza's
I've
an
played.
RPG!
It's the best RPG I've played.
I'm so excited to hear about
since
that game.
P5.
That's crazy. I'm hyped. I'm so hyped. But anyway, thank you guys for listening. This has been GamePunx Bonus Round. I'm Ryan. You can find me all over the internet at Nouveau Art Punk. That is my handle on most sites. I am on Instagram. I am on Twitter. I am also on Lebertoxt. So if you want to read my funny video game movie reviews, which I have written one or two of, you can read them there. And comic book movie reviews too. These are all related. See, I tied it all back. What about you, Ben? Where can people find you? What do you do?
You can find me on Twitch at Scratch Me Silly, or like it's twitch.tv/Scratch Me Silly, whatever. I stream. The streams will be back to a pretty regular schedule of 2 or 3 times a week. Tuesdays are kind of iffy because I do work, and then I come home and record the podcast, and then sometimes I'm like, I don't really want to stream, so some weeks I might drop the Tuesday stream, but so far it's Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday that I stream. And then I'm also Scratch Me Silly on Twitter. I shitpost a lot and then bitch about leftist ideology. Or bitch.
Hell yeah.
I just bitch about politics with a leftist ideology. I don't bitch about leftist ideology.
Leftism. No.
Yes,
we're not those kinds of gamers. That's why we're called GamePunx.
Yeah. Like I didn't want to get it all crossed up, but I'm a little out of it. So anyway, whatever. I hate Nazis, and I hate anti-homeless structures, and also anti-disability structures.
Yeah,
and I also
holy
hate
shit.
Fried chicken restaurants that are selling
fried chicken for fucking $60, which is
$60, or like 3 pieces of chicken tenders for $22 with $80 bottle of wines, and like you can
that's
go
literally
fuck yourself.
That's literally just gentrification in practice.
It's gentrification on crack, because it's not even subtle.
Really horrible. No, it's
like
not.
You're gentrifying fried chicken.
That's so fucking
like
evil.
what the like.
There's so many layers to that in terms of like how that is extremely racist.
Oh man,
how that is
gets,
like
yeah.
Oh my god.
Like what you just sit and think about it for like 30 minutes, and it goes like, oh
literally
man, that's
one
so
of the
much
most
for
like
fried
racist,
chicken. What
classist
the fuck?
things I can fucking even imagine.
Yeah,
but
did you see the slanted bench?
Oh god, did I ever?
It's
the slanted bench for able-bodied people to lean on, but fuck everybody else, I guess. And
I mean, to be fair, there
are
are disabled-bodied people who it is better to lean than to actually sit down on a bench. But like, why wouldn't you have both?
Yeah.
Oh, because
also,
you hate homeless people.
Homeless people
That's
can't
why.
sleep there. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Oops.
Some fucking bullshit.
Anyway.
But anyway, yeah, this has been GamePunx. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week with another full-length episode. But in the meantime, stay cool. Fuck the system. Fuck anti-homeless and anti-disability architecture.
Yeah, I think I dubbed it because Backwash was like, what the fuck? And I was like, this is actively hostile city development.
Yeah, hostile city development is exactly what it is. Fuck all that shit. Hope you guys have yourselves a good week. Don't be stupid. COVID's still out there. Wear your damn masks.
Yeah.
Take care of yourselves. Take care of the people you love.
But not too close.
But not, yes, stay 2 feet apart. 2 feet apart. Smart.
See you next week.
Yeah.